Welcome to the channel. If you've ever stood in front of your flower bed thinking, everything looks healthy, everything looks colorful, so why does this feel completely chaotic? Then this video is absolutely for you. We're breaking down the 10 biggest mistakes that turn otherwise beautiful flower beds into visual disasters. And here's the thing, most of these aren't about dead plants or neglect. They're about structure. They're about intentionality. They're about understanding that a flower bed full of pretty things isn't automatically a pretty flower bed. Let's dive in. The first mistake is treating your flower bed like a plant catalog. This happens constantly. You see something at the garden center. You love the color. You bring it home. 2 weeks later, you see another plant you like. Another empty spot appears and gets filled. Before you know it, your bed doesn't feel like a design. It feels like a collection. Every single plant reads as a separate decision, and that visual chaos is what catches the eye before anyone even notices the beauty. When every plant stands alone, your brain can't find a pattern. It's searching for rhythm and finding randomness instead. The cure for this isn't less variety, it's strategic repetition. When the same plant or the same shape appears in multiple places throughout your bed, suddenly the eye stops bouncing around looking for meaning. Repetition creates intention. It transforms a bunch of plants I like into a carefully designed space. The second mistake is fuzzy, undefined edges. This one gets overlooked so often, but it's doing so much work for your overall aesthetic. When the border between your flower bed and your lawn is vague, wobbly, or visually confusing, the entire bed immediately feels less intentional. A strong edge is actually working two jobs at once. It's separating your planting from the surrounding space, yes, but it's also telling the viewer that this is a designed area, not just plants that happen to grow here. Without that clarity, even spectacular plants start to feel like they're drifting aimlessly into your yard. You don't need a rigid, formal edge. You need an edge that's actually there, something the eye can understand. Something that says, this matters. This was planned. The third mistake is spacing that makes no sense. And here's where it gets tricky, because spacing problems come in two flavors. Sometimes everything is crammed so tightly together that the plants blur into a confusing mass. Crowding creates chaos. The shapes lose definition. Airflow suffers. Maintenance becomes a nightmare. The whole bed starts to feel like it's fighting itself. But awkward, uneven spacing is just as destructive. When gaps between plants feel random and disconnected, your bed loses its rhythm. The eye can't move smoothly through the space. Instead, it gets jarred by visual unevenness. Good spacing isn't about perfection. It's about creating a sense that someone thought this through. That these gaps exist for a reason, not by accident. The fourth mistake is going overboard with color. Flowers are inherently colorful, and that's their appeal, right? So logically, more color should mean more beauty. Except it doesn't work that way. When too many strong colors compete for attention without any real relationship to each other, your flower bed doesn't feel vibrant. It feels loud. It feels like every plant is shouting, "Look at me," simultaneously, and when everything is demanding attention, nothing gets it. The eye doesn't know where to rest. It just bounces frantically from one color explosion to the next. This doesn't mean your flower bed needs to be boring. It means your colors need to have a conversation instead of fighting a war. Sometimes a flower bed needs less color. More often, it needs better color relationships. The fifth mistake is ignoring height and layering. Picture this. Your tallest plants are blocking the view. Your shortest plants disappear completely. The middle layer is muddy and unclear. The whole bed just feels jumbled, even though nothing's actually wrong with the individual plants. Good layering creates visual harmony. When there's a considered relationship between short, medium, and tall plantings, the eye knows how to read the space. It understands the structure. It feels natural. When heights are all over the place, the bed feels confused. And here's the subtle part. People often sense this problem before they can describe it. They just know something's off. 9 times out of 10, it's the heights. The sixth mistake is letting one color dominate too heavily. We're not talking about the mistake from earlier where multiple colors clash. This is different. This is when one color, say pink or purple, completely takes over your bed. When a single color dominates too much of the visual space, it can actually flatten your design. It removes the visual texture that comes from color variation. Your bed looks monochromatic instead of thoughtfully curated. The answer isn't necessarily adding more colors. It's about balance. A dominant color can absolutely work, but it should be anchored and balanced by supporting colors that give depth without stealing the show. The seventh mistake is forgetting that negative space matters. Flower beds don't need every square inch planted. In fact, they shouldn't. Open space, bare soil, mulch, or strategically empty areas actually helps your plants breathe visually. They reduce visual overwhelm. They give the eye a place to rest. When every inch is packed with plant material, the bed feels frantic. When there's intentional space between plantings, the design reads more clearly. The plants feel more confident. There's room for them to exist as individual elements within a cohesive whole. The eighth mistake is planting in patterns that don't serve your yard. Maybe you planted in neat rows. Maybe you planted in clusters that make sense to you, but look random from the house. Maybe you planted everything in the middle and left the edges bare. Your planting pattern should work with how people actually view and use your yard. If you're looking at this bed from your kitchen window, the pattern should make sense from that angle. If it's a front yard bed, it should work from the street. The pattern isn't just about what looks pretty. It's about what looks intentional from the perspectives that matter. The ninth mistake is choosing plants that don't actually fit together. This is subtle because individually, the plants might be beautiful. But as a collection, they're working against each other. Maybe you've mixed plants with completely different growth habits. Maybe you've combined plants that need different water or sun conditions, so half of them are always stressed. Maybe you've put fine-textured plants next to chunky-textured plants without enough of either to create balance. Plants need to be chosen as a team, not as individuals. When they work together, the bed feels cohesive. When they're fighting, it shows. The 10th and biggest mistake, the one that underlies almost every other problem, is having no clear focal point or organizing principle. Even if you fix spacing, fix heights, fix color relationships, a flower bed can still look messy if there's nothing holding it together. No anchor, no focal point, no reason for the eye to settle anywhere. The bed needs structure. It needs something that says, this is what matters. This is where your attention goes. Everything else supports this. Sometimes that's a strong specimen plant. Sometimes it's a repeated mass that grounds the entire design. Sometimes it's simply the most compelling section that everything else echoes or relates to. But without that organizing logic, your flower bed is just a pile of plants. With it, it's a designed space. Here's what matters most. A flower bed doesn't look messy because the plants are bad. It looks messy because the structure isn't working hard enough. The way forward isn't adding more. It's about understanding what's making the current design harder on the eye than it needs to be. Fix that, and everything else falls into place. Your flower bed becomes calmer, more intentional, more beautiful. And when your flower bed looks better, your entire yard transforms too.